The house we couldn't afford. Emma Lewis was tired of small rooms and noisy streets. Every day she walked home from the bakery with the smell of bread on her clothes and the taste of sugar in her mouth. She loved her job, but it paid just enough to pay rent, buy groceries, and maybe get coffee on Sundays. Her husband, Andrew, was a painter. Not a famous one, not even a local one, just a man who painted because he couldn't stop himself. Their tiny apartment was filled with unfinished canvases and the smell of turpentine. Emma often said the walls looked like they were closing in, and Andrew would reply, smiling softly, "That's just because they're jealous of my art." Life was simple, sometimes happy, sometimes heavy. They laughed about bills, argued about the future, and dreamed about a house they could never buy. One sunny afternoon in early spring, Andrew saw an advertisement online. A beautiful old mansion for sale, only 30 minutes away. The picture showed white walls, green gardens, and windows that reflected the sky like mirrors. He called out to Emma, who was folding laundry. "Let's go see it," he said, eyes shining. Emma looked up from her clothes. "See what?" "The house," he said. "Just for fun. Just to look." Emma smiled faintly. "Andrew, we can't even buy new curtains. Why see a mansion?" "Because," he said, "dreams are free." He said it so simply that Emma couldn't argue. That Saturday they borrowed a friend's old car, filled the tank with just enough fuel for a round trip, and drove to the address written on the ad. The road slowly changed from busy shops to quiet lanes. Trees lined both sides, bending softly over the street. When they finally reached the gate, Emma stopped breathing for a second. The house stood tall and peaceful, surrounded by trimmed hedges and a long driveway. It was not new or shiny, it had an old grace like something that had seen many lives before. "This," Andrew whispered, "is it? The dream." Emma smiled. "The dream we can't afford." At the door, a man in a gray suit welcomed them. He was cheerful, with kind eyes and a fast smile. "Good afternoon. You must be the Lewises. I'm Mr. Collins, the agent. Please come in. Mrs. Whitmore might join us later if she feels up to it." They stepped inside and the world seemed to change. The air smelled of lemon polish and roses. A golden light poured through the wide windows. Everything looked polished, calm, and still, like the house was breathing quietly. Emma walked slowly from one room to another, afraid to touch anything. The living room had tall shelves, a piano, and paintings of gardens. A long mirror showed her reflection, tired, small, but curious. Andrew walked behind her, his fingers brushing the carved wooden railings. "Can you imagine living here?" he said softly. Emma didn't answer. She could imagine it too easily. Mornings filled with light, no noise from the upstairs neighbor, no cracked walls or broken taps. Mr. Collins kept talking about the design, the size, the nearby school, but Emma barely listened. Every corner had something beautiful. A crystal vase, an old clock, soft curtains that danced a little with the wind. Still, deep inside, she felt something strange. A quiet sadness in the air, like the house missed someone. Before leaving, she turned back for one last look. The house stood silently behind them, tall and patient, as if it was waiting. Just as they were about to leave, a car stopped at the gate. An older woman stepped out, dressed in a soft blue coat and white gloves. Her hair was silver and neatly tied back. "Mrs. Whitmore," Mr. Collins said with a warm smile. "These are the visitors I told you about, Andrew and Emma Lewis." Mrs. Whitmore smiled kindly. Her eyes were sharp yet gentle. "Ah, wonderful. I always like to see who walks through my house. It tells me what kind of dreamers are left in this world." Andrew laughed softly. "We're only dreamers, I'm afraid. We couldn't buy this house even if we wanted to. Mrs. Whitmore looked amused. That's all right. Sometimes a house doesn't need to be bought. It just needs to be seen. She invited them in again, saying the evening felt too beautiful to waste. She asked Mr. Collins to join them for tea, but he excused himself, another appointment. Soon only Emma, Andrew, and Mrs. Whitmore sat together in the sunroom. The table was set with teacups, small sandwiches, and a bowl of fruit. The house looked even softer in the fading light. Mrs. Whitmore asked them about their lives, where they lived, what they did, what they dreamed of. Andrew spoke freely, telling her about his painting, about how he wanted to paint houses that remember things. Emma listened, half embarrassed, half proud. When Emma spoke about the bakery and their small apartment, Mrs. Whitmore nodded thoughtfully. You remind me of myself, she said. Many years ago, my husband and I lived in a place so small, we couldn't even open a window without hitting the neighbor's wall. But we dreamed big, and one day we built this house together. Her voice softened. He passed away 5 years ago. Since then, this house has been much too quiet. A short silence filled the room. Then Mrs. Whitmore smiled again gently. Why don't you both stay for dinner? It's been a long time since there were young voices in these halls. Emma wanted to say no, but Andrew looked so excited she couldn't. They stayed. Dinner was warm and strange at the same time. The food was delicious. Roasted vegetables, soup, and soft bread that reminded Emma of the bakery. They talked about small things, gardens, travel, books. The house seemed to listen. After dinner, Mrs. Whitmore stood by the piano and said, almost shyly, Would you do me a small favor? Stay here for a few days. The house likes company. So do I. Emma looked at her, unsure if she was serious. But the woman's eyes were kind, almost pleading. Andrew said yes before Emma could think. And just like that, they found themselves saying they would stay for the weekend. They arrived the next morning with 2 small bags. Emma had packed simple clothes and a notebook. Andrew brought his paints and brushes. Mrs. Whitmore welcomed them with tea and fresh flowers in their room. The room was large, with white curtains that moved with the wind, and a small balcony that looked out over a green garden. Emma felt like she had stepped into a picture. The first day passed in quiet joy. Emma helped in the kitchen, though there was already a maid who came in the mornings. She loved cooking in the big kitchen. The sound of pans, the smell of coffee, the wide space around her. Andrew set up his easel by a window. He painted the garden, the trees, and sometimes Mrs. Whitmore sitting by the window reading a book. Every evening, the 3 of them would sit in the garden with tea. The house glowed softly behind them. Mrs. Whitmore talked about her travels, about her son who had lived abroad. She spoke gently, with care in her words. Emma started to relax. She hadn't laughed so easily in months. Andrew looked happier too. His paintings began to fill with color again. But one night, when Emma couldn't sleep, she got up to drink water. The house was silent except for the ticking of a clock. As she walked through the hallway, she noticed a faint light under a door at the far end. It was slightly open. Inside, she heard soft piano music, slow, careful notes, played by someone who knew the tune very well. She thought it must be Mrs. Whitmore, but when she peeked inside, the room was empty. Only the piano lid was open, and the music stopped. She felt a sudden chill, though nothing seemed wrong. She closed the door gently and went back to bed, telling herself it was probably just an old music box or something left on by mistake. The next morning, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the locked room. Curiosity slowly grew inside her. When Mrs. Whitmore went out to meet a friend, Emma walked down the hallway again. The same door stood there, slightly open this time. She pushed it gently. The room was filled with sunlight and dust floating in the air. It looked like it hadn't been used for years. There was a piano against the wall, a shelf of books, and several photographs in silver frames. Emma walked closer. Her eyes widened. In the photograph stood Mrs. Whitmore, younger, smiling, with a man beside her and a young couple standing close. The couple looked almost exactly like Emma and Andrew. The woman had the same brown hair, the same calm eyes. The man had the same messy curls, the same quiet smile. Emma felt her heartbeat quicken. She looked again, closer this time. The young woman in the photograph even wore a dress similar to the one Emma had packed for this weekend. She sat down for a moment, trying to understand what she was seeing. On the back of one photo was a name written in old ink, Anna and Michael 2013. Emma ran her finger over the names. They were strangers, and yet somehow they looked like shadows of herself and Andrew. When Andrew came upstairs later that day, she showed him the pictures. He laughed at first, saying it was a coincidence, but when he saw the photos, he grew quiet. They decided not to mention it to Mrs. Whitmore. Emma nodded slowly, but deep inside something felt off. "Why keep this room locked?" she asked softly. Andrew shrugged. Maybe it hurts her to see it. Maybe it was their room. They put the photos back and closed the door. Emma tried to forget about it, but the images stayed in her mind. Every time she looked at Mrs. Whitmore, she wondered, did the woman see her as Emma or as someone else? That night, she couldn't sleep again. The wind outside made the curtains move like slow waves. From somewhere deep in the house, she thought she heard faint music, the same tune from the piano. She lay still, listening. Then she closed her eyes, pretending she didn't hear it. The days that followed were quiet and bright. The morning light poured through the curtains, soft and gold, filling the house with warmth. Emma and Andrew woke up to the sound of birds and the smell of toast coming from the kitchen. It was easy to forget how little they owned or how small their real life was. Inside Mrs. Whitmore's house, everything felt calm and slow. What was supposed to be a weekend turned into a week, then another. Each day, Mrs. Whitmore found reasons for them to stay. "There's a fair in the village this weekend," she would say. "You must see it." Or, "The gardener will bring fresh roses tomorrow. You'll love them." Emma would smile and nod, telling herself they would leave soon, but somehow they never did. Mrs. Whitmore treated them like family. She cooked small dinners, made tea every afternoon, and insisted they sit in the garden with her. She told stories about her husband, her travels, her son. Sometimes she repeated the same story twice, but Emma didn't mind. She liked hearing the old woman's voice, steady and kind, filling the large, quiet spaces of the house. Andrew painted more than ever. His hands moved easily now, the colors brighter than before. He painted the garden at dawn, Mrs. Whitmore sitting by the piano, Emma reading in the sunroom. Each painting seemed full of light, as if the house itself gave him new energy. Mrs. Whitmore often stood beside him while he painted, her eyes soft with admiration. "You bring life back into this house," she said once. "It hasn't looked so alive in years." Emma smiled when she heard that, but she also began to notice small things that unsettled her. Sometimes when Mrs. Whitmore spoke to her, she called her Anna by mistake. The first time it happened, Emma thought she misheard. The second time, she gently corrected her. Mrs. Whitmore laughed it off. "Old age," she said. "Names slip away sometimes." But it kept happening. Once, while setting the table, Mrs. Whitmore laid out 4 plates instead of 3. When Emma asked, she paused, staring at the extra plate as if surprised to see it there. Then she quietly removed it without saying a word. That night, Emma told Andrew. "She keeps calling me Anna," she said. and today she set 4 plates. Andrew looked thoughtful. Maybe those were her son and daughter-in-law's names. The couple in the photos. Emma nodded slowly. Maybe. But in her heart she felt something else, something sad and heavy that she couldn't name. Time passed. The weather grew warmer and the garden filled with flowers. Emma began helping Mrs. Whitmore water the plants every morning. The old woman moved slowly, but her hands were steady. "These roses are older than you," she would say with a small laugh. "They've seen everything." Then one morning, while Emma was trimming the roses, she heard a thud. She turned and saw Mrs. Whitmore lying on the grass, motionless. The watering can had fallen from her hand, spilling water into the soil. "Mrs. Whitmore!" Emma cried, running to her side. She shouted for Andrew. Together they carried her into the house and called an ambulance. At the hospital, everything smelled of antiseptic and quiet panic. The nurses moved quickly, speaking softly to one another. Mrs. Whitmore was taken into a room for tests. Emma sat in the waiting area, her hands shaking. Andrew tried to comfort her, but his own face was pale. After a while, a nurse approached with a clipboard. "You must be her daughter-in-law, Anna," she said kindly. "She's asking for you." Emma froze. The nurse looked puzzled. "Oh, aren't you Anna?" Emma managed a faint smile. "No," she whispered. "I'm just a friend." When she walked into the hospital room, Mrs. Whitmore was lying on the bed, her skin pale but her eyes awake. She looked at Emma and smiled weakly. "Anna, you came," she whispered. Emma stood still. "It's Emma," she said softly. The old woman blinked, confused. Then tears filled her eyes. "Oh, my dear," she said. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to see you, both of you, happy again. You remind me so much of them." Her voice trembled. "My son and his wife. They died in an accident 10 years ago. They were all I had. When I saw you and Andrew at the door that day, I thought God had sent them back to me. Just for a little while." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She reached out and took the old woman's hand. "We're here," she said gently. "You're not alone." Mrs. Whitmore smiled faintly and closed her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me my home back, even for a moment." She stayed in the hospital for a week. Emma and Andrew visited every day, bringing her flowers from her own garden. When she grew stronger, they brought her home. The house seemed quieter now, its light dimmer. Emma could feel the weight of sadness in every room. She couldn't stop thinking about what Mrs. Whitmore had said. The love in her eyes, the pain in her voice, it was all real. Yet Emma also knew they couldn't stay trapped in someone else's memories. That night, while Andrew painted in silence, Emma sat by the window. "We have to go," she said finally. Andrew put down his brush. "She needs us," he said softly. "She has no one else." "I know," Emma said. "But we can't live a lie. We're not her family. We're strangers she turned into ghosts." He didn't answer. The next morning he avoided the topic, painting quietly. Mrs. Whitmore was feeling better and asked them to stay a little longer. "Just until I'm back on my feet." Emma wanted to refuse, but she couldn't find the heart to say no. So they stayed for another week. But each day Emma felt more uneasy. The old woman grew more attached, more forgetful. Once she hugged Emma tightly and whispered, "I missed you so much, Anna." That night, Emma cried quietly, unable to explain why. Finally, one evening she said to Andrew, "We're leaving tomorrow." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded. They packed their bags after midnight, moving silently through the house. The moonlight made everything look pale and unreal. As Emma zipped her suitcase, she heard a soft voice behind her. "Leaving so soon?" She turned. Mrs. Whitmore was standing in the doorway, her robe wrapped tightly around her. Her face was calm, but her eyes were full of sorrow. "Mrs. Whitmore," Emma began, "you need rest. We thought you were going to leave without saying goodbye," the old woman said quietly. "Just like they did. The night before the accident, they were supposed to visit me. They never came." Her hands trembled. "Please," she whispered. "Don't go. Stay a little longer. You've made this house alive again. You've made me alive again." Emma stepped closer, tears rising. "You've given us more than you know," she said softly. "But this house belongs to your memories, not to us." For a moment Mrs. Whitmore said nothing. Then she smiled, a small, tired smile. "You're right," she said. "But I'm glad I got to see you both. Even if it was only a dream." Emma hugged her gently. The old woman's hands were cold but steady. They left before sunrise. The air was cool and the road was empty. As the car moved down the driveway, Emma looked back. Mrs. Whitmore stood at the window, her figure small against the tall house. The first light of morning touched her face. She didn't wave, but Emma felt she was watching until the car disappeared into the mist. The drive back felt long. The closer they got to the city, the smaller everything seemed, the streets, the buildings, even their apartment. But when they stepped inside, Emma felt something strange, relief. The walls were still cracked, the space still small, but it was theirs. It was real. Andrew unpacked his brushes and canvases. The first thing he painted that week was not a bright garden, but their little living room, with Emma sitting by the window and a mug on the table. The painting looked simple, but there was warmth in it, the warmth of truth. Over the next few months, Andrew's work began to sell. A small gallery owner saw his paintings online and offered to display them. His paintings of Mrs. Whitmore's house, especially the one showing the garden under evening light, caught people's attention. Emma sometimes stood beside him during exhibitions, proud and quiet. When people asked about the old house and the paintings, Andrew only said, "It was a dream we once lived in." Life moved on. They saved a little money, fixed the leaky pipe, and bought new curtains. Emma kept working at the bakery, Andrew kept painting. Everything felt ordinary again, until one morning 6 months later a letter arrived. It came in a brown envelope with an unfamiliar seal. The handwriting was neat and formal. Emma opened it slowly. It was from a lawyer. The letter explained that Mrs. Whitmore had passed away peacefully in her sleep. She had left no family behind. But she had left something for Emma and Andrew, a small box to be delivered to them personally. Emma's hands shook as she read. She didn't cry, she just sat in silence for a long time. Then she and Andrew went to the lawyer's office the next day. The lawyer, a gentle-looking man with glasses, handed them a wooden box. It was polished but old, with a small golden clasp. "She left no instructions except that this should go to you," he said. When they opened it, they found a folded note and a small silver key inside. The note was written in Mrs. Whitmore's graceful handwriting. It said, "Dreams should never stay locked away. The house will wait if you ever wish to come home." Emma held the key for a long time, feeling its cool metal against her palm. She didn't know what to say. Andrew placed his hand over hers. "We can visit someday," he said softly. But they didn't. Not right away. The house remained a memory, bright, gentle, and strange, like a place that belonged both to them and to someone else. Andrew painted one final picture that year. It was the mansion again, glowing under the warm light of evening, the windows soft and golden. Inside, behind the glass, he painted 3 figures: Mrs. Whitmore by the piano, Emma by the window, and himself standing near the garden. When Emma looked at it, she felt her throat tighten. The 3 figures looked peaceful, as if the house had finally accepted them all. That night, she placed the small silver key beside the painting on the shelf. It caught the light from the lamp, shining faintly. The next morning, when sunlight filled their apartment, the key gleamed as if it remembered something. And somewhere, far away, in a quiet town surrounded by trees, an old white house stood waiting, still, silent, and full of dreams that never really ended.